Good evening, saints. Back again. The second part of the Transfiguration. I know I wasn't going to be able to finish it last week, so I'm going here to finish it out this week. Finish out the verses 6 through 13, and we'll finish this lesson. It's good to see everyone. Good to be out here teaching the Lord's Word. It's great. Feel great. I hope you all feel great. It's an honor to be here, and so let's finish out this lesson. You know, I'm not long-winded. I get straight to the point. So let's pray and let's get right into it. Eternal God, Father, you truly are worthy to be praised. Thank you for this time. We thank you for this occasion. We thank you for allowing us to learn your word, Lord. Let us continue to learn your word. Continue to divinely illuminate our minds, Lord, so that we may grow in spirit and grow in truth, that we may lack nothing, Lord. Let's develop this greater understanding of your word, a greater appreciation, Lord, so that will permeate our hearts, that we may communicate it to others, that we may be edified, that you ultimately may be glorified. So just allow your will to be done, and we'll be careful to give you all the honor, praise, and glory that you truly deserve. In Jesus' name, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the ultimate superlative one, who surpasses all others. Amen. All right, here we go. So I left off last week in verse 6. Correction, in verse 5. I concluded with verse 5 because I ran out of time. So today, we'll start with verse 6, and we will finish out this lesson. I will finish out this lesson. Okay, so let's do a recap. We was doing the first 5 verses. We was talking about we talked about 6 days later Jesus makes this prediction about the Son of Man coming in his kingdom, and how he brought Peter, James, and John up to the mountain. He brought them up to ensure privacy, and he was transfigured before them, and his face was shone like the sun, and his garments were white as light. And we talked about that, and we talked about how Moses and Elijah appeared before them, and I explained the significance of Moses and explained the significance of Elijah, how God established the Mosaic covenant with Moses, and how Elijah led Israel back to that covenant after they had forsaken the Lord's commandments in the worst possible way. And we talked about that, and we talked about how Peter was trying to build some tabernacles for Moses and Elijah, and he perceived the goodness of the situation, but really didn't understand it all. And then the Lord had cut him off when the bright cloud appeared, and Shekinah glory of God, and he spoke from heaven, declaring, "This is my Son, whom I'm well pleased." Right, so he did all that, and so after that, we were here at verse 5. Like, this is verse 5. So he said, "I'm my beloved Son, whom I'm well pleased. You listen to him." So we talked about that in great detail, what he meant about that, referring to Moses, and what listen to him, what that meant, and so on and so forth. All right. So now, while he was still speaking, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and behold, a voice out of the cloud said, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I'm well pleased." Okay, so we talked about that, and we talked about Psalms 2:7, indicating that the Lord's anointed, and it indicates that confirms that Jesus is the Son of God, and then Isaiah 42:1 confirms that Jesus is a suffering servant of God. So he's a Son of God, and he's a suffering servant, right? And we talked about how Jesus is a greater prophet than Moses, who Moses predicted would come. Right? And we talked about that, right? And we talked about how the Lord is basically everything in the Bible encapsulates and centers around the Lord, right? The whole Bible is centered on the Lord. So we talked about that, right? And then after that, we go to verse 6, and I didn't have time to get into verse 6, so we'll start with that today. So I just want to do a recap of what we did last week, so everybody's still online, still have a fundamental understanding of where we are. Okay, and so now we're at the point that disciples hear from the Lord, they hear a voice from the cloud, and then it overshadowed them, and then he speaks. And then after that, verse 6, it says, when the disciples heard this, they fell face down to the ground and were terrified. Okay. So when they heard this, they fell face down to the ground. So this revelation had the same effect on Peter, James, and John as it did on the Israelites on Mount Sinai. So remember in Exodus 19, when Lord spoke to Moses, said, I'm going to speak to you in front of all Israel so they'll know and believe in you forever. And then in the very next chapter, the Lord spoke the 10 Commandments. And then after that, the people were terrified. And then in verses 18 through 21, Exodus 20, it says, all the people received the thunder and the lightning flashes and the sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they trembled and stood at a distance. Then he said to Moses, speak to us yourself, or we will listen, but let not God speak to us, or we will die. Moses says to people, don't be afraid. Do not be afraid, for God has come in order to test you, in order that the fear of him may remain in you, so that you may not sin. All right? So this had an effect on them right there, when they see the glory of the Lord revealed. All right? So when the disciples heard this, they just fell down on the ground. They just fell to their faces. All right? So, and this also, this revelation had the same effect that it had on Daniel. Okay? Daniel at chapter 10, when he was at the bank of the Tigris River. Now, it says that he sees this man. Right now, give a description of this man. Some say it's a Christophany, which is a non-physical manifestation of Christ. We don't know if it was the Lord. The text doesn't say, so we can't be dogmatically factual about it. However, it is conceivably true, and the reason I say that is because this description that he gives is essentially identical to the description John gives in Revelation 1:13 through 17. And then after John gives his description, and then when the Lord speaks, John says, look, he just fell down to the ground like a dead man. But then the Lord touches him and says, don't be afraid, I'm the first and the last. So we know undoubtedly that is the Lord. But here it doesn't indicate, okay? So just be clear on that, right? However, in any event, right, Daniel gives this description, right? So this is man, he has this burrow body, which is like aluminum silicate. And then he has this lightning face, his flaming eyeballs. He has his polished bronze hands, polished feet, dressed in linen. He has a gold belt around his waist, and he says his voice is a tumult, which is an uproar, right? So when Daniel hears that, he just falls down to the ground on his face in a deep sleep. Daniel 10:9 says, but I heard the sound of his words, and as soon as I heard the sound of his words, I fell in a deep sleep on my face, with my face to the ground. So he falls in a deep, deep sleep with his face to the ground. So here's the thing. So that is the Lord, and we know, if when people see the glory of the Lord revealed and they realize they're in his presence, they immediately feel terror. This should give them deeper conviction that Jesus is in fact the Messiah. Okay, talking about the disciples. Okay? All right. So, verse 7. It says, and Jesus came to them and touched them and said, get up, do not be afraid. Oh, this is very short. This is a very short verse here. It's not a lot to say. Just after hearing God speak from a cloud and being overshadowed and frightened by it, Jesus' affection and his comforting words reassured them that they were safe. Okay. Verse 8. And lifting up their eyes, they saw no one except Jesus alone. Okay, so they saw no one except Jesus alone. So now, this is substantiated proof that the kingdom is indeed in the future. Okay? Because look, now, verse 8. Did I say Moses? I meant Jesus. I don't know. Maybe I accidentally said Moses, but they saw no one except Jesus alone. Okay. Forgive me. Anyway, so this is substantiated proof that the kingdom is in the future. Okay, so now, Jesus is alone by himself. Moses and Elijah are gone. They're gone. They're completely gone. Now, Peter's not going to be erecting any tabernacles, not going to be erecting any booths or anything like that, temporary structures, nothing like that. So this was just a mountaintop moment. It was momentary. It was just momentary. So you realize now that the future, the kingdom is in the future. Okay, so, and then you have Moses and Elijah, which is a verification of the Old Testament kingdom promises, right? You have Moses representing the law, Elijah representing the promises. Okay, so you have them there. And then Jesus, what he says, remember in 16:28, he says, like, some of you won't taste death, some of you who are standing here won't taste death until you see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. All right, and then in the verse prior to that, 16:27, he says, for the Son of Man is going to come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and will then repay every man according to his deeds. Well, simply put, Jesus is going to come one day, he's going to judge the world, and he's going to establish his kingdom. Okay, so you have the reality of this kingdom is evident through the connection of the promise and the transfiguration. He makes the promise. 6 days later, he has the transfiguration. It's momentary, and it's in regards to the kingdom, because it's a preview of the kingdom. It's a glimpse of the kingdom, and it's guaranteed that he's coming back to establish his kingdom. He's coming in his kingdom, okay? So, now, keep in mind, these disciples witness all this. They witness all this. They get a glimpse of it. They see it. Like I said last week, they see all this. And then Peter even affirms this in his own epistle. In 2 Peter 2 Peter 1, verses 16 through 18. He talks about that. I'm not going to read it to you, but you get time, you can read it for yourself. He affirms that what he saw, and what he's talking about, he is referring to the transfiguration. Okay? All right, so, verse 9. And as they were coming down from the mountain, Jesus commanded them, saying, tell the vision to no one until the Son of Man has risen from the dead. Wow, okay. He gives them a command. Tell the vision to no one until the Son of Man has risen from the dead. Now, Jesus gives his disciples a prohibitive commandment contemporaneously as they were coming down from the mountaintop. Now, this prohibition not to tell anyone was to prevent the publicity of miracles that would divert the public's attention from the Lord's gospel message, which would invariably impede his mission. Okay, so if you all remember the account of the leper, remember the leper who came to Jesus, right, to be cleansed. This account is told in Matthew 8 chapter, verses 1 through 4, and it's told in Mark 1st chapter, verses 40 through 44. All right, so here's what happens. So the leper comes to Jesus, and he says, he bows down before him. He says, Lord, if you are able, make me clean. The Lord stretches his arm out to him, right, touches him and says, I'm able. And immediately the leprosy is cleansed from the man. Right? And Jesus, what does Jesus tell him? He's telling him, look, don't tell anyone. Right? Do not tell anyone, but go show yourself to the priest and present an offering as Moses commanded as a testimony to them. Right? This is what he says. So what happened? Okay, what happened? In terms of the man not telling anyone, the exact opposite is precisely what happened. He did exactly what Jesus forbade him to do. Probably with gratuitous enthusiasm, he went out and proclaimed it everywhere and spread the information all around. So much so that Jesus could no longer publicly enter the city, but he had to remain out in unpopulated areas. Mark 1:45. He had to stay out in unpopulated areas. Now, we talk about miracles. Now, we see this transfiguration, we see it, and this is revelation that he bestows to these three disciples, right? So he doesn't do any healing or anything per se, but it's all encapsulated with the miracles as well, because he doesn't want anyone to tell them about this, and then he doesn't want this leper to tell anyone about what he did for him, All right, so now, regarding miracles, miracles are a significant part of Jesus' ministry. They're very important, extremely important. However, they're ancillary. All right, they are subsidiary. All right, so preaching the gospel, the good news, evangelion, okay, can ultimately dying on a cross, bringing justice to the nations, and salvation to the world. That was Jesus' primary objective. Didn't come so people can be consumed with miracles. All right, and I'm going to read a few verses here for you just to illustrate my point. And Jesus even said so himself. Okay. All right, so let's take a look, and you can read along with me if you like. And I normally don't read, many verses, but I just have to illustrate this point. So let's go to Mark, first chapter, verses 30 through 38. Okay, here we go. Now Simon's mother-in-law was lying sick with a fever, and immediately they spoke to Jesus about her. He came to her and raised her up, taking her by the hand, and the fever left her, and she waited on them. When evening came, after the sun had set, they began bringing him all who were ill, those who were demon-possessed, and the whole city gathered at the door. Okay. And he healed many who were ill with various diseases and cast out many demons, and he was not permitting the demons to speak because they knew who he was. In the early morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up and left the house and went away to a secluded place and was praying there. Verse 36, Simon and his companions searched for him. They found him and said to him, "Everyone is looking for you." Here it is, verse 38, this is what I'm talking about. And he said to them, "Let us go somewhere else to the towns nearby, so that I may preach there also, for that is what I came for." Okay? That is what he came for. That is his primary objective. Okay? Not so people can be, like I said, inundated with so many miracles, and that's all they're thinking about, right? Because that's all they want. They want their healing power. They just looking for Jesus so Jesus can heal them. But do they want to hear what he has to say? We know. We know the story. Okay? So this being said, so you have like this slight incomprehensibleness of what the disciples just witnessed. And all this will make plain sense after the resurrection. All right, so Jesus predicted his death, burial, and resurrection. Okay, Matthew 12:40. For just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the sea monster, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Okay, well, you know Jesus rose on the third day, but 3 days and 3 nights, that's Hebrew computation, that's their reckoning. Okay? So that's the burial. And Matthew 17:22 and 23 says, "And while they were gathered together in Galilee, Jesus said to them, 'The Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him, death, and he will be raised on the third day, resurrection.' And they were deeply grieved." All right, so he predicted that, and it all came into fruition. All right, so now the disciples, having previewed the Lord in his glorified state in his pre-resurrection form, right? So hoping I'm not confusing anyone. So when he was transfigured, he more than likely assumed his post-resurrection body, which is somewhat similar but quite different from his pre-resurrection body. Okay, so during the transfiguration, more than likely assumed that body, but it was done in the pre-resurrection form because this is before the resurrection. So the disciples get to witness all this. Okay, so, and they also spoke to him, touched him, and seen him in his post-resurrection status after the resurrection. So if there's any kind of minuscule faith or any scintilla of doubt, then perhaps it should be eliminated, particularly after the resurrection, right? So all this will make sense after the resurrection, okay? All right, so we're going to do 10, 11, and 12. We're going to do them all together because it's practical to do so, because the verbiage of the the verse. It's just practical to do so. So, verse 10, and his disciples asked him, why then do the scribes say that Elijah must come first? Verse 11. And he answered them and said, Elijah is coming and will restore all things. Verse 12. But I say to you that Elijah has already came, and they did not recognize him, but did to him whatever they wished. So also the Son of Man is going to suffer at their hands. Okay. So the scribes were adhering to Malachi's prophecy. Malachi 4:5. Behold, I am going to send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and terrible day of the Lord. Okay, so a little bit about Malachi. Malachi was the last prophet of the Old Testament. You look in your Bible, in the table of contents, Malachi is the last book. Last book, prophetic book. Okay. He prophesied during the time of Nehemiah. Nehemiah chronologically concludes the Hebrew Bible, i.e. the Old Testament. Okay? So, the next period after that is the intertestamental period, or the time between the testaments. And then you have the New Testament, the Apostolic era, and so on. Okay? So, that period between the testaments is approximately like 400 years. And often is referred to as the silent years. All right, well, God was not silent. He was working behind the scenes, but he was silent in the sense that he did not speak to another prophet until John the Baptist. And that's what Malachi is talking about. He says, behold, I'm going to send you Elijah, the prophet, before the coming great and terrible day of the Lord. Yes, like I said earlier in the previous lesson, John the Baptist is going to come in the power and the spirit of Elijah, right? And even when I was talking about in between those testaments, the time between the testaments, even Amos even said, Amos 8:11 said, there will be a famine for the hearing of God's word. So God didn't speak again until John the Baptist, okay? So that's what he's talking about. So John the Baptist will come to announce the arrival of the Messiah, to restore Israel, preach reconciliation to God, so souls may be saved. But he was only able to do it to a limited degree. He did the baptisms in Matthew 3. He did the baptisms, and he was subsequently arrested. Talks about that in Matthew 14:3 and Mark 14:17. Now, the Jewish leaders realized Elijah was dead. They did not suggest that he had returned. However, they did not perceive John the Baptist coming in the power and the spirit of Elijah. And we know that Herod Antipas subsequently had him killed, had him beheaded at his stepdaughter's request. Okay, so he came to restore Israel, but he was limited to what he could do because he was arrested and subsequently killed. Okay, so in a similar fashion, Jesus came to establish the kingdom, but he was crucified. He was rejected, just like John the Baptist, before he could actually perform it. So he essentially, him and John suffered the same fate. Now keep in mind, Jesus is superior to John, but we know that because John even says, I'm not even fit to remove his sandals. All right, so we know that he is superior to John, and John is prophesied the forerunner for the Messiah. Right? So Jesus came to establish the kingdom, but he was not able to form it because he was subsequently crucified. But of course, it's all a part of God's will, and they were both rejected, and they both suffered a similar fate. Okay, so, and it even says, Jesus even says in Mark 9:13, but I say to you, Elijah has indeed come, but they did to him whatever they wished, just as it is written of him. Right? And so when we talk about his death, and the account is in Matthew 14 verses 1 through 12, and Mark 6 verses 14 through 29. Okay? All right, so. All right, so they both suffer the same fate. All right. All right. So, verse 13, final verse. All right. Then the disciples understood that he had spoken to them about John the Baptist. And the disciples understood that he had spoken to them about John the Baptist. So, okay, so disciples apparently understood John the Baptist initially fulfilled the Elijah prophecy about Elijah returning. However, they still seem perplexed as to why Jesus had to die. So then again, they're still not comprehending everything. You know, they're still not comprehending the significance of everything, right? So keep in mind, Jesus instructed his disciples on his coming. He instructed them on his death. He instructed them on his resurrection. Right? He instructed them on the kingdom postponement, kingdom in the future. Okay? He instructed them on his person. He instructed them on his program. All right? So he's done all these things. He's informed his disciples on all these things, but now you have this sort of contrast between the Transfiguration and sort of this, I want to say, crude unbelief, so to speak. And it's all part of this mounting tension that magnifies Jesus as he's moving closer and closer to his passion, closer to the resurrection. And what I'm referring to this is in verse 17. So remember, they come down from the mountain, right? So in verses 14 through 17, in this particular text, Jesus encounters his demoniac, right? So the man comes to Jesus and says, Lord, he says, can you help me? He says, my son is a lunatic. He's fallen in the water, fallen in the fire. He's gravely ill. And he said, I brought him to your disciples, but they couldn't cure him. And Jesus, in verse 17, he says, oh, you unbelieving, perverted generation. He said, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I put up with you? All right, bring him here to me. All right, so he brings the boy to Jesus, and Jesus rebukes the demon at once, and the young boy is healed, right? But the disciples couldn't do it because the littleness of their faith, Jesus said. They had the littleness of their faith, right? So here's the thing. Old Testament, same thing. So remember when the Lord had redeemed the Israelites out of Egypt, and all the work he did via Moses and bringing them out and destroying the Egyptians, this first generation Israelites, right? All the work he's done, that he shown forth to them, and how he spoke the 10 Commandments on the mountain, and how they were frightened, and he spoke to Moses in front of all the people, and they were frightened, right? And even the people said, look, everything in Exodus 19, they said, look, everything the Lord said we'll do. Okay, he even said that. All right, so now, and then, like I said, Moses established, the Mosaic Law was established, the Lord established that through Moses, right? So, all those commandments were written down on that tablet. Okay, so, what happens? Well, we see in chapter 32 that the Lord wants to destroy his people. He wants to destroy the Israelites because they are worshiping golden calves. This is the first generation Israelites who he redeemed out of Egypt, all right, who he spoke the commandments to. And the first commandment, there be no gods before me. Second, no graven images, right? And they're worshiping golden calves, right? But they already saw the glory of the Lord revealed, but they're still worshiping golden calves. So Moses is on the mountain with the Lord, and he's doing an appeal. He's doing an entreaty for the people, on the people's behalf. So the Lord won't destroy him. So the Lord changes his mind. He decides not to destroy him. Right? So Moses descends down from the mountain. Right? This is Exodus 32, verses 15 through 20. He's coming down from the mountain. And what does he see? He sees these Israelites dancing and worshiping the golden calves. And Moses is furious. So much so that he takes the tablets and smashes them at the foot of the mountain, takes the golden calves, right, burns them, grounds it to powder, pours over the water, sprinkles it over the water, and makes the sons of Israel drink it. Oof, can't wrap my head around that. But yes, he does that. So this is what I'm saying. So it's like, yes, they see the glory of the Lord revealed, but yes, they still have this unbelief. But like I said, Jesus is going closer to the resurrection. He's moving closer to his passion, and everything's going to make sense after the resurrection, right? And this lesson here is to illustrate primarily that the kingdom is indeed in the future, right? And in the future, you'll have the rapture, you have the tribulation, the second coming, the millennial reign, great white throne, and then you have the new heaven and new earth, okay? And we'll all be there. Like the New Testament saints, the Old Testament saints, the church age, well, New Testament church age saints, the Old Testament saints, tribulation saints, will all be there, all right? And this will be ultimately done for his glory, all right? And that concludes the lesson. That concludes the lesson on the Transfiguration, just illustrating how the kingdom is in the future, and how Moses and Elijah represent the law, and how they're on the mountain, and how they both had intimate moments with the Lord on the mountain. And of course, like I said, Moses represents the law, Elijah represents the prophets. So that's the lesson. I hope you enjoyed it. We know we ended in kind of short, but that is the end of the lesson. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back soon, have some more lessons for you. But just remember, saints, just remain steadfast in the Lord. Keep Jesus first. And remember that his loving kindness is everlasting, as is reverberated through Psalm 136. Right? Remember that. And just keep growing in faith. Keep trusting the Lord. And I thank you for tuning in. And until next time, God bless. Good night.